A homeless Navy SEAL bought an abandoned bank for shelter, but his loyal K9 uncovered a vault exposing a secret powerful men would kill to keep buried. A homeless Navy SEAL bought an abandoned bank. His dog found a rusty vault nobody opened. Nathan Brooks thought he was buying nothing more than 4 walls to survive another brutal Montana winter. But when his retired military K9 Atlas refused to leave an ancient rusted vault alone, they uncovered evidence buried for decades, proof that would clear a fallen teammate's name, expose a conspiracy that stole an entire town's future, and force one broken veteran to finish the mission his best friend never lived to complete. Before we begin, comment 1 if you believe the truth always finds its way out, or 0 if you think some secrets stay buried forever, and tell us where you're watching from. Some winters don't just freeze the land. They freeze a man's belief that tomorrow will be any different. By the time Nathan Brooks crossed the Montana state line, the windshield of his battered pickup was covered with thin feathers of ice, and the heater had given up 200 miles earlier. Every breath drifted through the cab like pale smoke before disappearing into the gray morning light. Beside him, a gray-faced German shepherd lifted his head from an old military blanket. Atlas. His ears twitched at every unfamiliar sound. A faded tactical collar still circled his thick neck, though the patches had long since been removed. One front paw carried an old limp from a mission years ago, and silver hairs now surrounded his dark eyes. Age had slowed him, but it had never touched the quiet intelligence behind those eyes. Nathan reached across the seat and scratched behind the dog's ears. "You still with me, old man?" Atlas answered with the smallest thump of his tail. That was enough. For nearly 3 years they had slept in truck stops, abandoned barns, empty campgrounds, and roadside rest areas stretching from Oregon to Wyoming. They had crossed deserts baked by summer heat and mountain passes buried beneath snow. They had shared canned beans over campfires and cold rain inside leaking tents. Neither one had ever walked away. People often noticed the dog first. Then they noticed the veteran. Then they looked away. Nathan understood why. His beard had grown uneven and streaked with gray before he turned 45. His heavy winter coat had been stitched together so many times that no original fabric remained visible near the elbows. His boots had survived far longer than they were ever meant to. But it wasn't his clothes that made people uncomfortable. It was his eyes. They belonged to someone who had seen things no one should ever carry home. Once those eyes had scanned hostile rooftops in distant countries. Now they searched grocery store dumpsters after closing time. Life could change that quickly. 3 years earlier, Chief Petty Officer Nathan Brooks had retired from the Navy after nearly 22 years with the SEAL teams. He had imagined fishing trips, quiet mornings, coffee on the porch, maybe finally learning how to sleep through the night. Instead, sleep became an enemy. Every loud sound became an ambush. Every crowded room became a battlefield. Every shadow carried a memory. Doctors called it severe post-traumatic stress disorder. Nathan called it living inside a mission that never ended. His marriage survived deployments. It survived missed birthdays. It survived broken bones. It did not survive the man who came home after the final mission. Emily, his wife of 19 years, had tried. God knew she had tried. She sat beside him through counseling appointments. She held him after nightmares. She learned exactly which fireworks would send him running from the backyard barbecue. She whispered that none of it was his fault. But eventually, she grew exhausted from fighting enemies she couldn't see. One rainy October afternoon, she quietly packed 2 suitcases. She kissed his cheek. "I love the man you were," she whispered through tears. Then she walked away before watching him fall apart. Nathan never blamed her. Some wounds bleed onto everyone standing nearby. Within a year, medical retirement paperwork, unpaid bills, and the sale of their home followed. He kept almost nothing. An old pickup, A worn backpack, Atlas, nothing else mattered. The truck rolled over another rise. A weather-beaten wooden sign emerged through drifting snow. Welcome to Pine Ridge. Population, 2,148. Nathan slowed without saying a word. Pine Ridge rested beneath towering mountains that seemed to scrape the low winter clouds. Pine forests climbed every hillside until disappearing into white mist. Smoke drifted lazily from chimneys across town, carrying the scent of burning pine wood into the frozen air. It looked peaceful. The kind of place where children still rode bicycles, where neighbors knew each other's names, where trouble belonged somewhere else. Nathan had learned appearances lied. Still, something about the town felt different. Maybe it was simply because he was tired. He pulled into a deserted overlook just outside town. The engine sputtered once, twice, then died. Silence settled around them. Only the wind remained. Nathan rested both hands on the steering wheel. For several minutes, he didn't move. Atlas leaned forward and gently rested his head against Nathan's shoulder. The simple weight of the dog's head pulled Nathan back before the memories could swallow him. "Easy," Nathan whispered. "I'm here." But another voice answered inside his mind. "Incoming!" The explosion came without warning. Not outside, inside. His breathing shortened. Snow outside the windshield disappeared. Instead, dust. Smoke. Radio chatter. Someone screaming for a medic. Blood spreading across broken concrete. Nathan's fingers gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. His heartbeat thundered. He could almost smell burning fuel. Almost hear Lucas yelling over automatic gunfire. "Nathan!" Atlas suddenly pushed harder against him. A wet nose pressed firmly into Nathan's trembling hand. Then came one sharp bark. Not loud, not aggressive, intentional. Nathan closed his eyes. One slow breath, then another. The battlefield dissolved. The truck returned. Snow drifted quietly across the windshield again. His pulse slowed. "Thanks, partner." Atlas licked his hand once before settling back down. Nathan smiled faintly. Doctors had taught grounding exercises. Medication had dulled the edges. Therapy had helped for a while. Nothing worked better than Atlas. The retired military dog somehow always sensed the storm before Nathan himself realized it had begun. Maybe soldiers never really retired. Some simply walked on four legs. Nathan climbed from the truck, boots crunching across fresh snow. The cold struck immediately. Sharp, clean, honest. He welcomed it. Pain reminded him he was alive. They walked slowly toward town together. People passed in pickups. A teenage boy waved. An elderly rancher tipped his hat. Nobody knew who Nathan Brooks was. That felt strangely comforting. Main Street stretched only a few blocks. An old grocery store. A hardware shop. A diner with steam fogging the windows. A barber pole turning slowly despite the cold. Everything looked weathered but stubbornly alive. Then Atlas stopped walking. Nathan almost stumbled when the leash tightened. "What is it?" The German Shepherd wasn't looking at people. He wasn't watching traffic. His entire body had become still. His nose lifted into the air. His ears leaned forward. Across the street stood a 3-story brick building darkened by decades of weather. Broken windows reflected the pale winter sky. Boarded doors leaned crookedly beneath cracked stone columns. Weeds poked through frozen sidewalks. A faded sign barely remained above the entrance. Pine Ridge National Bank. Nathan barely glanced at it. Atlas couldn't stop staring. The dog slowly walked toward the abandoned building until the leash reached its limit. Then he simply stood there, watching, waiting. Nathan frowned. "You smell rabbits?" Atlas didn't move. You see somebody? Nothing. The dog had entered the same focused state Nathan remembered from working patrols overseas. Alert, silent, listening, watching something no one else noticed. A gust of wind swept down Main Street. Loose snow spiraled across the empty steps leading to the abandoned bank. Somewhere inside the building, something echoed. Or perhaps it was only old wood settling. Nathan couldn't tell. Atlas gave one quiet whine. Not fear, recognition. Nathan studied the forgotten building a little longer. For reasons he couldn't explain, the place felt lonely, as though it had been waiting, not for years, for decades. He finally tugged gently on the leash. Come on. Atlas looked back at him, then reluctantly followed. But every few steps, the old German shepherd turned his head toward the abandoned bank again, as though something inside refused to let him leave. Nathan never noticed. Not yet. He simply walked farther into Pine Ridge, believing he was searching for a warm meal and somewhere to survive another winter. He had no idea that before the snow melted, that forgotten bank, and the faithful dog walking quietly beside him, would change every remaining day of his life. Nathan had learned long ago that dogs noticed things people ignored. A change in the wind, a distant sound, a stranger's heartbeat. Atlas had saved his life more than once because he trusted instincts that couldn't be explained. Still, as they walked farther down Main Street, Nathan convinced himself the old German shepherd had simply caught the scent of mice or raccoons living inside the abandoned bank. He had bigger problems than an empty building. His wallet contained exactly $43.17. The gas gauge hovered below empty. The truck would need repairs before long. And another Montana winter storm was already building over the Bitterroot Mountains. The first icy flakes drifted down as Nathan pushed open the door to the only diner on Main Street. A little brass bell chimed overhead. Warm air wrapped around him like an old quilt. The smell of fresh coffee, bacon, homemade biscuits, and beef stew filled the room. For a brief moment, he simply stood there breathing. Atlas remained perfectly beside him, calm and disciplined, despite the tempting smells. Conversations stopped. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Nearly everyone inside glanced toward the newcomer. Nathan recognized the look immediately. Who is he? Is he staying? Can we trust him? A rancher in a denim jacket quietly returned to his meal. Two elderly women whispered to each other. A teenage waitress looked uncertain before disappearing into the kitchen. Only one person smiled. Behind the counter stood an elderly woman with silver hair tied into a loose bun beneath a faded blue apron. She couldn't have been much shorter than 5 feet, yet she carried herself with quiet confidence earned over many years. She dried her hands on a towel and walked over. You boys look frozen. Her voice carried the warmth of someone who had spent a lifetime feeding strangers. Nathan removed his old knit cap. Morning, ma'am. My name's Margaret Hale. Nathan. She looked down. And who's this handsome gentleman? Atlas. Margaret smiled even wider. Military dog? Nathan nodded. Retired. So are you. It wasn't a question. Nathan hesitated. Yes, ma'am. Margaret didn't ask anything else. She simply pointed toward a booth beside the front window. Sit. Nathan reached into his pocket. I should probably tell you before I order. I don't have much. Margaret waved away the explanation. You look hungry. I asked if you wanted breakfast. I didn't ask what your bank account looked like. For the first time in weeks, Nathan laughed. It surprised even him. Atlas settled quietly beside the booth, while Nathan wrapped cold hands around a steaming mug of black coffee. The heat stung his fingers. It felt wonderful. Margaret returned carrying scrambled eggs, biscuits covered in sausage gravy, thick slices of bacon, and a bowl of water for Atlas. The old shepherd waited patiently. Nathan gave a single nod. "Go ahead." Only then did Atlas lower his head to drink. "Best manners in the county," an older rancher muttered from across the room. "Better than my grandkids." A few people chuckled. The tension eased. Nathan slowly ate, careful not to rush. Real food always tasted different after too many days of canned soup and gas station sandwiches. Margaret quietly refilled his coffee. "You passing through?" Nathan stared into the dark liquid. "I haven't decided." She nodded as though she understood more than he had said. Most people who pass through Pine Ridge either find a reason to stay. She glanced toward the frosted window, or they keep driving because they're afraid they'll never leave. Nathan followed her eyes. Across the street, the abandoned bank stood silent beneath falling snow. Its broken windows reflected the gray sky like blind eyes. "You know that place?" he asked. Margaret sighed. "Everybody knows it." "What happened?" She remained quiet for several seconds before answering. "Depends who you ask." Nathan waited. "Officially, the bank failed almost 30 years ago. And unofficially," she leaned closer, "nobody likes talking about it." Nathan noticed several customers pretending not to listen, but they were listening. Every one of them. It closed almost overnight. No warning. No goodbye. Families lost farms. Businesses disappeared. People stopped trusting banks. She lowered her voice. "Some folks believe the building took more than money." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "You believe that?" Margaret smiled sadly. "I believe pain has a way of settling into places." Her words lingered long after she walked away. Outside, snow continued falling. Nathan finished breakfast and quietly counted his remaining cash. Margaret noticed. She pretended not to. When he stood to leave, she slipped 2 wrapped sandwiches into his backpack. "You forgot your lunch." "I didn't order, you have now." Nathan started to protest. Margaret simply crossed her arms. "I've been winning arguments longer than you've been alive." He smiled again. "Thank you." Outside, the cold hit immediately. Atlas stepped onto the sidewalk, then stopped. Again. The old shepherd turned toward the abandoned bank. His ears stood tall. His entire body grew still. Nathan frowned. "What is it with that place?" Atlas gave a low, uncertain whine. Not fear, something else. Almost expectation. Nathan looked across the street. Snow gathered along the cracked stone steps. The faded brick walls looked older up close. One upstairs window had lost its plywood covering. Darkness filled the opening beyond. For just a second, Nathan thought he saw movement. A shadow. Gone almost immediately. Probably blowing snow. Probably. He shook his head. "Come on." This time, Atlas followed more slowly. Near the end of Main Street, Nathan noticed a small county bulletin board beside the post office. Most of the papers advertised livestock auctions, church dinners, or snowmobile repairs. One bright yellow notice had been freshly pinned near the center. County Property Auction Delinquent Tax Sale Pine Ridge National Bank. Opening bid. $300 demolition scheduled in 14 days. It then stared. $300. He looked back toward the abandoned building. It wasn't worth restoring. Not really. Broken windows, roof damage, probably frozen pipes, maybe mold, maybe worse. But it had walls, a roof, a fireplace if he was lucky. Shelter. Atlas suddenly walked closer to the bulletin board. then immediately turned back toward the bank. Back. Forth. Back again. Nathan watched the old dog carefully. Military working dogs weren't trained to point randomly. They focused with purpose. Always. "You really want me to look inside there?" Atlas met his eyes. The shepherd's tail gave one slow wag. That settled it. Nathan spent the afternoon asking questions. The county clerk confirmed the tax auction would take place the following morning. "There probably won't be any bidders," she admitted. "Most folks just want the building gone." "Unsafe?" She nodded. "And expensive." Nathan spent nearly an hour sitting inside his truck afterward. $43. Not enough. He reached beneath the driver's seat and pulled out a small, weathered metal box. Inside lay the last valuable thing he owned. A Navy retirement watch. It had been presented to him on his final day in uniform. His name was engraved across the back. 22 years of service. He stared at it for a long time, then quietly closed the lid. By sunset, he had traded the watch at the local pawn shop. The owner paid far less than it was worth. Nathan didn't argue. An hour later, he stood inside the county office holding a folded receipt. Every dollar he owned was gone. The abandoned bank now legally belonged to Nathan Brooks. As he stepped outside, snowflakes drifted silently through the fading light. Atlas looked toward the bank once more. This time, instead of whining. The old German shepherd walked confidently toward its front steps, as though he already knew they were finally going home. Nathan stood on the snow-covered sidewalk, staring at the faded brick building that now belonged to him. Home. The word felt strange. For years, home had been wherever his truck happened to stop before dark. Now, standing before a forgotten bank abandoned for nearly 3 decades, he realized how low his expectations had become. If it kept the wind away, it would be enough. Atlas climbed the cracked stone steps without hesitation. His old paws moved carefully over patches of ice, but his posture was different than it had been all morning. Purposeful. Focused. Nathan unlocked the heavy front doors with the ring of rusted keys the county clerk had handed him after the auction. The largest key resisted. He leaned his shoulder against the wood. The lock groaned. Then came a loud metallic click. The doors slowly swung inward. A rush of stale, frozen air rolled out like the building had taken its first breath in years. Dust floated through narrow beams of fading afternoon sunlight. The silence inside felt enormous. Every footstep echoed across polished marble hidden beneath decades of dirt. Broken teller windows lined one wall. Wooden desks sat where employees had simply walked away, leaving scattered ledgers, overturned chairs, and faded calendars behind. The air smelled of old paper, damp wood, rust, and time itself. Nathan stepped carefully through the lobby. Atlas remained close for only a moment. Then something changed. The old German shepherd lifted his head. His ears turned sharply toward the back of the building. Without waiting for a command, Atlas began walking. Not wandering. Tracking. Nathan frowned. Easy. Atlas ignored him. The dog crossed the lobby slowly, nose hovering inches above the dusty marble floor. He stopped near an enormous circular vault door that dominated the rear wall. Even covered with rust, it remained impressive. Steel nearly a foot thick, heavy locking wheels, massive hinges. Above it, faded gold lettering still clung to cracked stone. Pine Ridge National Bank Security. Strength. Trust. Nathan couldn't help smiling bitterly. 3 words, 3 promises, all abandoned. Atlas sniffed around the vault for nearly a minute. Then he walked away. Nathan relaxed. Maybe it really had been mice after all. But instead of heading toward another room, Atlas circled behind an old teller counter, where broken filing cabinets leaned against warped walls. Then he froze, his nose pressed against the floor. He scratched once, twice, then looked back at Nathan. "What did you find?" Nathan knelt beside him. "Only old wooden flooring. Nothing unusual." Atlas scratched again, harder this time. Dust exploded into the air. Nathan noticed one floorboard shifting slightly beneath the dog's paw. He reached for the edge. It didn't move. He searched nearby until he found an old crowbar leaning against the wall, nearly hidden beneath collapsed ceiling plaster. The metal groaned as he wedged it beneath the loose board. After several attempts, the wood finally lifted. Cold air drifted upward from beneath the floor. There was a narrow, hollow space below. Nathan shined his flashlight inside. At first, nothing. Just dirt. Cobwebs, broken bricks. Then something metallic reflected the light. He reached inside. His fingers closed around cold steel. Slowly, he pulled it free. A military dog tag. The chain had long since rusted away. Mud clung to its edges. Nathan brushed it clean with his thumb. The engraved letters slowly appeared. Lucas Reed. Blood drained from Nathan's face. "No." His voice barely escaped. He read the name again. Lucas Reed. Impossible. Atlas watched quietly. Nathan's hands began shaking. He turned the tag over. Service number, blood type, religion. Everything exactly as military identification should be. Exactly like the one Nathan still wore beneath his shirt. No. His breathing shortened. Lucas was dead. He had watched the helicopter leave without him. Watched smoke rise into the sky. Watched command declare the mission lost. He had attended the memorial. He remembered folding the flag. He remembered silence. So how? How could Lucas's dog tag be hidden beneath the floor of a bank in Montana? Nathan searched the cavity again. This time his fingers found cracked leather. He carefully lifted out an old shoulder holster. The leather had dried with age but remained recognizable. Military issue. Personal modifications along one edge. Nathan knew them immediately. Lucas always carved tiny notches into his gear after every deployment. 1, 2, 3, 7. 7 successful deployments. Nathan closed his eyes. His chest tightened. The room seemed to tilt. Suddenly he wasn't inside an abandoned bank anymore. Heat, dust, gunfire, someone shouting coordinates, the roar of rotor blades overhead. Lucas running beside him through shattered concrete. "Move!" An explosion. Everything disappeared beneath smoke. Nathan stumbled backward into the teller counter. His flashlight rolled away across the floor. His breathing became ragged. Too fast. Too shallow. The smell of mold vanished. Instead came burning fuel. Cordite. Blood. His hands searched instinctively for a rifle that wasn't there. Incoming. Cover. Move. Move! His heart pounded violently against his ribs. Sweat formed despite the freezing air. "Nathan!" Lucas's voice echoed inside his head. Not a memory, a command, another explosion. Nathan dropped to one knee. His vision narrowed. Darkness crept inward around the edges. Then, Atlas, the old German shepherd, pressed his entire body against Nathan's side. Firm, steady, grounding him. Nathan barely noticed. The panic kept climbing. Atlas pushed harder, then placed one weathered paw gently across Nathan's shaking hand. Finally. The dog rested his forehead against Nathan's chest. His heartbeat was calm, slow, certain. Nathan stared down. Atlas never looked away. Those familiar brown eyes carried no fear, only trust, only loyalty. Breathe. Nathan whispered the word aloud. One breath, then another. He counted. 1, 2, 3. The battlefield slowly dissolved. The bank returned. Broken windows. Dust. Silence. Atlas never moved. After several long minutes, Nathan wrapped both arms around the aging shepherd. I've got you. His voice cracked. And you've always had me. Atlas's tail tapped gently against the floor. Nathan sat there for a long time before speaking again. I thought he died. The empty building offered no answer, only echoes. Eventually, Nathan forced himself to search the hiding place once more. This time, he discovered something tucked farther beneath the foundation stones. A photograph. Its edges had curled with moisture. Most of the colors had faded. He carefully brushed away decades of dirt. 4 men stood shoulder to shoulder, all wearing desert camouflage, all smiling beneath blinding sunlight. Nathan recognized every face. Himself, Lucas, Ethan, Mason, taken after their final deployment together, before everything changed, before the mission everyone stopped talking about. Nathan's thumb rested over Lucas's face. What were you doing here? The question lingered unanswered inside the abandoned bank. Outside, daylight began fading behind snow-covered mountains. Nathan gathered the dog tag, the holster, the photograph, nothing else. He slipped each item carefully into his backpack. Atlas suddenly stood, his ears turned once more toward the enormous rusted vault. The dog stared at it without blinking. Not barking, not growling, listening. Nathan slowly followed his gaze. The vault remained sealed, silent, motionless. Yet something about it felt different now, as though finding Lucas's belongings had unlocked far more questions than answers. Nathan walked toward the massive steel door. He rested one gloved hand against the cold, rusted surface. It hadn't been opened in decades. But standing there beside Atlas, for the first time, he was certain someone had desperately wanted whatever lay behind it to remain hidden forever. Nathan kept his hand against the cold steel of the vault for several more seconds. The metal felt strangely alive beneath his glove, not warm, not moving, simply heavy with years that refused to speak. Atlas remained motionless beside him, staring at the circular door with the same quiet concentration he had shown during patrols overseas whenever danger hid just beyond sight. Nathan finally stepped back. Not tonight. His voice echoed softly through the empty lobby. Whatever answers waited inside that vault had survived nearly 30 years. They could wait one more day. Outside, dusk settled quickly over Pine Ridge. Snow drifted through the fading light, covering footprints almost as soon as they appeared. Nathan carried an old folding cot he had discovered in a storage closet into what had once been the bank manager's office. The room overlooked the lobby through cracked glass windows. A rusted wood stove stood against one wall. After nearly an hour of cleaning ashes from its firebox and patching the stovepipe with scraps of sheet metal, he finally coaxed a small flame to life. Orange light flickered across peeling wallpaper. Atlas curled beside the stove with a satisfied sigh. For the first time in months, neither of them had to wonder where they would sleep. Nathan removed Lucas Reed's dog tag from his pocket. He turned it over in his palm again and again. The edges were worn smooth. The engraving was unmistakable. Questions crowded his mind. How had Lucas's belongings ended up beneath the floor of an abandoned bank in Montana? Why had no one ever mentioned Pine Ridge? Why hide military gear beneath a bank instead of taking it to Lucas's family? Nothing made sense. Sleep came slowly. When it finally arrived, it brought no peace. Nathan stood once more beneath a foreign desert sky. The sun burned white overhead. Dust rolled between shattered buildings. His radio crackled with broken voices. "Blue 2, report!" someone yelled. Another explosion ripped through the street. Lucas turned toward him. His face was streaked with dirt. "You've got civilians!" Nathan reached forward. Then Lucas disappeared beneath a wall of smoke. Nathan ran. The ground shook violently beneath every step. A helicopter circled overhead. Someone screamed his name. Then everything went silent. Nathan jerked awake. His heart hammered against his ribs. The room was dark except for glowing embers inside the stove. His breathing came in short bursts. Atlas was already standing beside him. The old shepherd rested his chin gently on Nathan's knee. "I'm okay." Nathan whispered the words more for himself than the dog. After several minutes, his breathing steadied. Outside, snow continued falling. Morning arrived wrapped in gray clouds. Nathan stepped onto the front sidewalk carrying a broom he'd found in the maintenance closet. He spent nearly 2 hours clearing snow from the bank entrance. Not because anyone would visit, because keeping his hands busy quieted his mind. Across the street, people occasionally slowed to watch. Most continued walking. A few whispered. No one crossed over. Until just before noon. A black pickup truck rolled slowly to the curb. The driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out wearing a heavy sheriff's jacket beneath a tan winter coat. His boots crunched across the snow with deliberate confidence. The silver badge on his chest caught the pale sunlight. Sheriff Travis Boone. Nathan leaned on the broom. "Mornin'." The sheriff stopped several feet away. His expression remained polite, but only on the surface. "You the fellow who bought this place?" Nathan nodded. "Yesterday." Boone looked up at the building. "Didn't think anyone would." "I needed a roof, so I've heard." Silence settled between them. The sheriff studied Nathan carefully. His eyes drifted toward Atlas. "Military dog?" "Yes." "And you?" "Retired Navy." Boone nodded once. "I appreciate your service." Nathan had heard that sentence hundreds of times. Sometimes people meant it. Sometimes they didn't. "I'm just stopping by," Boone continued, "to make sure you understand what you've bought." Nathan waited. "This building isn't exactly safe. I've noticed. The roof leaks. I've noticed that too." Boone smiled faintly. "There are also memories attached to it." Nathan said nothing. The sheriff stepped closer. "My advice? Clean it up if you want. Sell it if you can. But don't go digging around." Nathan met his eyes. "Digging? Old buildings collect stories." Boone shrugged casually. "Most are better left buried." Nathan felt Atlas move closer beside him. Not growling. Watching. The sheriff noticed. "Fine dog." "He is." Boone adjusted his gloves. "Welcome to Pine Ridge, Mr. Brooks." Then he walked back to his truck without another word. Nathan watched the pickup disappear around the corner. Atlas continued staring after it long after the engine faded. He knew my name. Nathan frowned. I never told him. The realization lingered. An hour later, Nathan decided he needed supplies. The hardware store sat only 2 blocks away. Inside, shelves overflowed with tools, chains, nails, and wood-burning stoves that had probably outlived several owners. As he paid for work gloves and lantern fuel, a soft voice spoke behind him. "You really bought the old bank?" Nathan turned. A woman in her early 30s stood holding a stack of school notebooks against her coat. Brown hair escaped from beneath a knitted hat. Snowflakes clung to her scarf. Her smile was warm but cautious. I did. I'm Emily Carter. She shifted the notebooks to one arm before offering her hand. I teach 4th grade. Nathan. I know. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Small town. She smiled apologetically. News travels fast. Atlas stepped forward. Emily knelt immediately. Instead of reaching for him, she let Atlas sniff her hand first. The old shepherd relaxed almost instantly. You've been around working dogs. My grandfather trained search and rescue dogs. She gently scratched Atlas beneath the chin. He trusts you, Nathan said quietly. He doesn't trust many people. Emily stood. I almost didn't come over. Why? She glanced toward the bank visible through the hardware store window. Because people here don't like talking about that building. Nathan remained silent. She lowered her voice. My parents had their savings there. Nathan listened carefully. When I was 10, the bank closed. Overnight. My dad lost everything he'd saved for our ranch. What happened? No one ever explained. She looked away. People asked questions. And they stopped asking. Nathan noticed genuine fear crossing her face. Not nervousness. Fear. My father used to say there were good people in town who suddenly acted like strangers. He believed something wasn't right. What did he find? Emily hesitated. I don't know, he died before he ever told us. Nathan felt a chill that had nothing to do with winter. Accident, she nodded slowly. That's what everyone said. Neither of them believed it. A loud crash outside interrupted the conversation. A delivery truck had dropped a crate onto the icy sidewalk. People looked over, then quickly returned to whatever they were doing. Emily leaned closer. If you're planning to stay, be careful. Of what? She glanced toward the street. Questions. Questions make people uncomfortable here. Before Nathan could answer, she quietly gathered her purchases. I should go. She smiled politely. It was nice meeting you. Then she disappeared into the falling snow. Nathan watched her walk away. The words echoed inside his mind. Questions make people uncomfortable here. Back at the bank, Atlas immediately returned to the rear lobby. Straight to the vault. He sat facing the giant steel door without making a sound. Nathan rested Lucas's dog tag on an old desk, then looked toward the silent vault. Yesterday, it had been only an abandoned building. Today, it felt like the center of a town-sized secret. Outside, the afternoon light faded behind the Bitterroot Mountains. Across Main Street, curtains quietly shifted as neighbors watched the old bank from behind frosted windows. No one came inside. No one offered help. No one asked what Nathan had found. It was almost as though the entire town had reached the same unspoken agreement decades earlier. Pretend nothing happened. Forget the building. Forget the people. Forget the past. But as Atlas sat silently before the rusted vault, refusing to look away, Nathan realized one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever had been buried inside Pine Ridge was beginning to wake up. The wind changed just before sunset. Nathan noticed it while hauling broken furniture into a growing pile behind the bank. The air had turned strangely still, the kind of silence that often settled over mountain valleys before a major storm. Even the crows that had circled the old courthouse all afternoon had disappeared. Atlas noticed it first. The aging German shepherd lifted his nose toward the western sky and stood perfectly still. Nathan followed his gaze. Dark clouds rolled over the Bitterroot Mountains like an approaching wall, swallowing the last streaks of sunlight. Snow was coming. a lot of it. Within an hour, the first flakes began to fall. By nightfall, they had become a blinding curtain. The old bank groaned beneath the weight of wind and snow. Loose shutters slammed against brick. Ancient pipes rattled somewhere inside the walls. The chimney moaned like a distant horn. Nathan added another split log to the stove. Orange flames danced across the manager's office while Atlas rested nearby, though not asleep. The dog kept lifting his head, listening, watching, always toward the vault. Nathan glanced at the old clock he had found on a shelf earlier that afternoon. Its hands had stopped at 4:17 sometime decades ago. The silence inside the bank felt different tonight. Not empty. Expectant. Outside, the storm erased Pine Ridge. Streetlights disappeared behind thick curtains of snow. No cars passed. No voices echoed outside. The entire town had vanished beneath winter. Nathan unfolded Lucas Reed's faded photograph one more time. 4 young seals, covered in dust, laughing, back when none of them believed life could break them. His thumb rested over Lucas's face. "What brought you here?" The question disappeared into the crackling fire. Then, scratch. Nathan looked up. Atlas had walked into the lobby. Scratch. Again. The sound echoed through the empty building. Nathan grabbed his flashlight. Atlas? The dog stood beside the massive vault. His ears were forward. His tail completely still. Scratch. Scratch. This time he wasn't pawing the vault door. He was scratching beneath the old teller counter several feet away. Nathan approached slowly. "You already searched here." Atlas ignored him. He continued scratching at one particular section of warped hardwood flooring. Nathan knelt. The boards looked ordinary, but after brushing away years of dust, he noticed faint metal beneath the edge of one plank. Not nails. A narrow steel plate. He wedged the crowbar underneath. Nothing. He tried again. The board finally lifted just enough to expose a rusted iron lever hidden beneath decades of dirt. Nathan frowned. Well, he brushed away more debris. The lever had obviously been installed intentionally. It wasn't part of the original flooring. Someone had concealed it. Atlas stepped back, watching. Nathan wrapped both hands around the cold iron. It refused to move. He pulled harder. Rust groaned. The mechanism shifted barely an inch, then stopped. Nathan planted one boot against the floor. Every muscle tightened. With one final pull, clank! The sound exploded through the bank. Deep, metallic, ancient. It echoed beneath the floors and inside the walls like a church bell waking after 30 years of silence. Nathan froze. Somewhere behind him, something moved. Not footsteps. Machinery. Slow. Heavy. The enormous vault door shuddered. Dust rained from the ceiling. Atlas immediately stood. The great steel wheel on the front of the vault turned almost imperceptibly. Nathan stared in disbelief. No. The hinges screamed, a sound so loud and tortured it seemed almost alive. Rust crumbled away in orange flakes. The vault door shifted outward perhaps half an inch. Then another. Cold air poured from the darkness inside. Not ordinary cold. The stale chill of a room sealed for decades. Nathan swallowed. His flashlight beam trembled slightly. Atlas moved closer to the opening, but stopped before crossing the threshold. The old shepherd sniffed the air, then looked back at Nathan, almost asking permission. Nathan rested one hand against Atlas's shoulder. Together. They pushed. The steel barely moved. Years of corrosion fought every inch. Nathan leaned with everything he had, His boots slid across marble. Muscles burned. Finally, the vault opened just wide enough for a man and dog to squeeze through sideways. Darkness waited inside. Complete. Silent. Nathan switched on the flashlight. The beam cut through swirling dust. Rows of safety deposit boxes covered 3 walls from floor to ceiling. Hundreds of them. Some hung open. Others remained locked. Wooden shelves lined the rear wall. Several cardboard archive boxes had collapsed with age. Bundles of old bank records lay scattered across the floor. Nothing looked disturbed. It was as though everyone had simply walked away. Then Nathan noticed something else. Dark stains, old, brown, spread across the concrete floor near the center of the room. He crouched carefully. Years had faded the color, but he had seen enough battlefields to recognize dried blood when he saw it. Atlas stepped closer. His nose hovered over the stains. The dog's ears slowly flattened. He let out the faintest whine. Nathan looked around again. No money lay scattered across the floor. No broken safes. No signs of a robbery. Only silence. He moved deeper inside. The flashlight revealed shelves stacked with dusty videotapes. Most carried handwritten labels. Property records. Loan files. Board meeting. Several had no labels at all. Nearby sat heavy ledgers swollen from moisture. A rusted filing cabinet leaned against the far wall. Everything looked abandoned, yet strangely untouched. Atlas suddenly walked toward the eastern wall. He stopped before a row of safety deposit boxes. Not barking, not scratching, simply staring. Nathan followed. Each brass plate carried a faded number. Then, unlike the others, this box had something tied around its handle. A narrow strip of faded green fabric. Nathan gently touched it. Military parachute cord. Old, weathered, intentional. His pulse quickened. He reached into his backpack. Lucas's dog tag rested inside. Could this be connected? The box was locked. No key, no combination. Nathan searched nearby shelves until he found a ring holding dozens of tiny brass keys. Most were tagged with handwritten numbers. He carried them back. One by one, he tried each key. None fit. Atlas quietly sniffed around Nathan's feet, then walked toward an overturned chair lying near the back wall. The dog nudged it with his nose. Nathan frowned. You found something else? He lifted the chair. Beneath it lay a small brass key almost hidden beneath decades of dust. Unlike the others, no tag remained attached. Nathan stared at Atlas. You've got to be kidding me. The old shepherd's tail wagged exactly once. Nathan picked up the key. His hand paused before the deposit box. Slowly, he inserted it into the lock. Click. Both man and dog froze. The lock had opened. Nathan's heartbeat echoed loudly inside the vault. His fingers wrapped around the small handle. He hesitated. Every instinct told him that opening this box would change everything. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. Snow hammered the broken windows. The lights from the wood stove flickered through the narrow gap of the vault door. Nathan slowly pulled. The metal drawer slid outward only a few inches before catching. Inside, something wrapped in faded military canvas waited beneath 30 years of dust. Atlas stared without blinking. Nathan reached toward it, and somewhere far above the storm, the old bank groaned once again, as if the building itself remembered exactly what had been hidden there all those years ago. Nathan held his breath. The small safety deposit drawer resisted at first, its rails stiff with decades of rust. He pulled again, slower this time, until the metal box slid free with a dry scraping sound that echoed through the vault. Inside lay a neatly folded piece of faded military canvas, tied with worn green parachute cord. Nothing about it looked accidental. Whoever had placed it there had wanted it protected. Nathan carefully untied the cord. The canvas unfolded across his hands. Inside rested a thick manila envelope sealed with dark red wax that had long since cracked with age. Written across the front, in bold black marker, were 6 words. For Nathan Brooks, personal. Nathan stopped breathing. His name, not typed, not printed, written by hand. His fingers trembled as he stared at the familiar style of handwriting. There was no mistake. Lucas Reed had written those words. Atlas quietly stepped closer until his shoulder pressed against Nathan's leg. Nathan swallowed hard. How? The question died in the empty vault. Lucas had been declared dead years ago. No one could have known Nathan would someday buy an abandoned bank in a forgotten Montana town. No one. Unless Lucas had planned for him to come. The thought sounded impossible, yet the evidence rested in Nathan's hands. He carefully broke the brittle wax seal. Inside were 3 items: a handwritten letter, a folded topographic map, and a small brass key attached to another military dog tag. Nathan recognized the handwriting immediately. Every mission briefing, every note left beside a coffee pot before deployment. Lucas had always written with the same precise block letters. Nathan unfolded the first page. The paper crackled softly. He began to read. Nathan, if you're reading this, then I was right about one thing. You never stopped looking for the truth. Nathan felt his throat tighten. Outside, the storm battered the old building. Inside the vault, only Lucas's voice seemed to exist. I know you're probably wondering how I knew you'd find this. Truth is, I didn't. I only knew that if anyone refused to accept easy answers, it would be you. Nathan slowly lowered himself onto the cold, concrete floor. Atlas settled beside him. If command told you I died during the operation, then they only told part of the story. Nathan closed his eyes. The familiar guilt returned immediately. The mission, the explosion, the helicopter. Everything after that had become fragments. Lucas continued. I survived that day. Nathan's eyes snapped open. He read the sentence again, then a third time. His pulse thundered inside his ears. Lucas had survived. I made it out with injuries, but before I could report back, I discovered something that had nothing to do with the mission overseas. It started with a financial transfer, then another. Military contractors, federal grants, money disappearing through shell companies. Nathan frowned. The next page explained more. Lucas had been temporarily assigned to assist a federal financial crimes investigator because of security concerns surrounding classified military contracts. What appeared to be accounting mistakes soon revealed something much larger. Millions of dollars, hidden through fake land purchases, false property foreclosures, abandoned banks, entire communities quietly stripped of valuable land. Nathan looked around the silent vault. The old bank suddenly felt very different. Lucas continued. Pine Ridge wasn't chosen because it was important. It was chosen because nobody outside Montana would notice. Families lost farms. The county blamed bankruptcy. Developers bought the land for almost nothing. Then federal infrastructure money increased its value. Someone became very rich. Nathan slowly unfolded the map. Dozens of ranches had been marked in red pencil. Property lines, dates, amounts, every transfer carefully connected. The center of every line, the Pine Ridge National Bank. His stomach tightened. This had never been about a failed bank. It had been about stolen land. Lucas's letter continued. When I started asking questions, people stopped answering. When I kept asking, they started following me. Nathan instinctively glanced toward the vault entrance. Only darkness waited there. The words pulled him back. The sheriff wasn't always involved. Neither were several county officials. But money changes people. Nathan immediately remembered Sheriff Travis Boone standing outside the bank. Old buildings collect stories. Most are better left buried. At the time, it had sounded like casual advice. Now, it sounded like a warning. Nathan read on. I copied everything before they could destroy it. Original ledgers, property transfers, recorded meetings, names, every person who helped bury the truth. Nathan looked toward the dusty videotapes lining the shelves. His flashlight swept across faded labels once again. Board meeting, loan files, executive session. Those tapes were no longer forgotten bank records. They were evidence. Real evidence. Lucas wrote one final paragraph across the last page. If you're holding this letter, they eventually found me. I don't know when. I don't know how. But I know they won't stop. Promise me one thing. Don't let innocent families keep carrying the shame that belongs to criminals. Tell them the truth. Finish the mission I couldn't. Signed simply. Lucas Nathan lowered the letter. The vault felt impossibly quiet. For several minutes he said nothing. Neither did Atlas. Finally Nathan whispered toward the empty room, "You weren't a traitor." His voice broke. You never were. For years he had carried the weight of believing his teammate had somehow failed, walked away, made a mistake. Now every memory shifted. Lucas hadn't disappeared. He had stayed behind to protect evidence, to protect people. Nathan wiped at his eyes before anyone else could have seen. Atlas gently rested his muzzle across Nathan's knee. The old shepherd's calm presence steadied him once again. Nathan reached down without looking. I know. He rubbed Atlas's neck. I miss him too. Atlas's ears twitched at the sound of Lucas's name. The reaction lasted only a second. Nathan noticed it anyway. Curious. But before he could think further, a sound echoed somewhere above them. Thump. Nathan froze. Atlas lifted his head instantly. Another sound. Not the storm, not the building settling. Footsteps. Slow, measured, crossing the marble floor above the vault. Nathan switched off his flashlight. Darkness swallowed the room. Atlas stood silently beside him. Neither moved. A faint beam of light drifted beneath the narrow opening of the vault door. Someone was inside the bank. Then came the unmistakable sound of an old floorboard creaking. Nathan's pulse slowed instead of racing. Training took over. Every sense sharpened. Outside the vault, a man's voice echoed faintly through the empty lobby. Calm, unhurried, almost confident. I know you're in here. Nathan recognized the voice immediately. Sheriff Travis Boone. Atlas's lips pulled back just enough to expose the tips of his teeth. No growl. Not yet. Only a warning. Nathan quietly folded Lucas's letter, slipped it back into the envelope, and placed every document inside his backpack. Whatever happened next, Lucas's mission had become his, and he wasn't about to let 30 years of buried truth disappear back into the darkness. Nathan remained perfectly still inside the vault. The old habits returned without effort. Slow breathing, quiet mind, every sound measured, every movement deliberate. Beside him, Atlas stood like a statue. The German shepherd's ears were forward, his weight balanced over all four paws, waiting for the smallest command. Outside the vault, another floorboard creaked. Sheriff Travis Boone's flashlight swept slowly across the lobby. The pale beam slipped through the narrow opening of the vault door before moving away again. I know you're here, Boone called calmly. His voice echoed through the abandoned bank. You left fresh footprints outside. Silence answered him. Nathan carefully tightened the straps of his backpack. Inside rested Lucas's letter, the map, the videotapes he had quickly gathered from the nearest shelf, and the brass key that had opened the deposit box. 30 years of buried truth now rested against his back. He couldn't lose it. Boone sighed. I'd rather not do this the hard way. A second voice answered from somewhere near the front entrance. We checked upstairs. Another man. Not a deputy. His tone carried none of the professionalism Nathan expected from law enforcement. Heavy boots crossed the marble floor. Then a third voice. The place is bigger than it looks. Nathan counted silently. 3. At least. Atlas's nose lifted slightly. The dog caught another scent. Then another. His posture changed almost imperceptibly. 4. Nathan trusted him. There were 4 men inside the bank. Boone spoke again. Mr. Brooks, I've spent my whole career protecting this town. I'd hate for someone to misunderstand what they're looking at. Nathan frowned. The sentence sounded rehearsed, not concerned, threatening. Atlas slowly turned his head toward the rear corner of the vault. Nathan followed his gaze. A narrow metal door sat almost hidden behind old filing shelves. Rust covered its hinges. No handle remained on the outside. He hadn't noticed it before. A maintenance exit. Or something else. Nathan quietly moved toward it. The door resisted until he pressed harder. It opened inward just enough to reveal darkness beyond. Cold air drifted through the narrow gap. Atlas looked back at Nathan. The message was unmistakable. This way. Behind them, Boone's flashlight reached the vault entrance. There it is. The sheriff's footsteps grew louder. Nathan slipped through the narrow doorway. Atlas followed without making a sound. Nathan gently pulled the metal door closed behind them. A heartbeat later, the vault door groaned. Someone had entered. Flashlight beams swept across the concrete floor. Nathan heard Boone stop. What the? One of the other men spoke. The vault's open, another voice answered. It wasn't yesterday. Boone's tone immediately hardened. Find him. Nathan and Atlas stood inside absolute darkness. The narrow passage smelled of coal dust, damp stone, and cold earth. Nathan switched on the smallest red lens attached to his flashlight. The dim glow revealed old brick walls disappearing into the darkness. A forgotten tunnel, barely wide enough for one person. Rail tracks no wider than a man's hand still ran down the center. Coal carts. Nathan understood immediately. The bank had once received fuel underground during Montana winters. Now the tunnel had become something else. An escape route. Behind them came the sound of metal drawers opening, paper scattering, boxes being overturned. They're gone. Keep looking. Nathan moved deeper into the tunnel. Every few yards he stopped to listen. Atlas stayed beside him, occasionally glancing behind them. The old shepherd's breathing remained calm. Mine tunnels carried sound strangely. Voices echoed long after footsteps stopped. Nathan estimated they had traveled nearly 100 yards before the tunnel curved sharply. Then, a crash echoed behind them. They found the door, Nathan whispered. Atlas immediately looked back. Faint flashlight beams danced against the tunnel walls far behind. They're in. Nathan extinguished the red light. Darkness swallowed everything. Only memory guided him now. Left hand against the wall. Steady pace. Conserve energy. He had navigated caves during SEAL training. Panic killed faster than darkness. Behind them came muffled voices. This way. Move. They couldn't have gone far. Nathan increased his pace. The tunnel gradually sloped upward. Old timber supports groaned overhead. Water dripped steadily from cracked stone. Atlas suddenly stopped. His ears shot forward. Nathan froze. "What is it?" The dog sniffed the air, then slowly moved toward the right wall. His nose stopped beside what appeared to be solid brick. Nathan ran his gloved hand across the surface. One section sounded hollow. He searched quickly until his fingers found a loose iron ring hidden beneath years of grime. He pulled. The bricks shifted outward. A concealed wooden panel swung open. Fresh air rushed inside. Snowflakes drifted through the opening. Nathan stared in surprise. The tunnel emerged behind an abandoned freight warehouse nearly 2 blocks from the bank. The blizzard had become fierce. Wind erased footprints within seconds. Perfect cover. Nathan stepped outside with Atlas. Before closing the hidden entrance, he looked back one final time. Voices still echoed somewhere deep inside the tunnel. They hadn't caught up yet. He carefully pulled the concealed door shut. From outside, it disappeared into the weathered wall. No one would notice it unless they knew exactly where to look. Nathan and Atlas crossed the deserted alley. Snow stung their faces. Streetlights glowed like blurred stars behind the storm. The town looked abandoned. Then, headlights. A pickup truck rolled slowly past the end of the alley. Nathan instinctively stepped behind a stack of wooden pallets. The truck continued without stopping. Sheriff Boone sat behind the wheel. 2 unfamiliar men rode beside him. They were searching. Nathan waited until the taillights disappeared into the storm. Only then did he move again. His truck remained parked beside the bank. Too dangerous. They would be watching it. He needed another place to hide until morning. Atlas suddenly limped. Nathan looked down. The old injury in the dog's front leg had stiffened in the freezing cold. Nathan crouched beside him. "You okay, partner?" Atlas leaned gently against him. His eyes remained fixed on the swirling snow ahead, still alert, still working. Nathan smiled sadly. "You've done enough for one lifetime." The old shepherd answered with a soft wag. Then, despite exhaustion and age, he stepped forward first. Leading, always leading. Nathan followed. Somewhere beyond the white curtain of snow, Pine Ridge slept peacefully, unaware that the truth buried beneath its oldest building had finally been uncovered. And somewhere behind them, Sheriff Travis Boone stood inside the abandoned bank, staring at an empty vault and a missing trail of evidence. For the first time in many years, someone had escaped with the secret. And by sunrise, the hunt for Nathan Brooks would no longer be hidden behind polite smiles and quiet warnings. It had become a race between a man determined to honor his fallen teammate and powerful people willing to risk everything to keep 30 years of lies alive. The storm covered Nathan and Atlas's tracks almost as quickly as they made them. Snow swept across the empty streets of Pine Ridge, swallowing the town beneath a blanket of white. Storefront lights blurred behind the wind, and the mountains disappeared into darkness. Nathan kept to the alleys. Every instinct developed over 2 decades as a Navy SEAL told him the same thing. Don't follow the roads. Don't become predictable. Atlas stayed close, his breathing steady despite the cold. Every few steps he glanced behind them, making sure no one was following. The old German shepherd had become more than a companion. He was Nathan's second set of eyes. When they reached the edge of town, Nathan stopped beneath the shelter of an abandoned lumber shed. He carefully removed the backpack and checked its contents beneath the dim beam of his flashlight. Lucas's letter, the folded map, the military dog tag, the brass key, 3 videotapes. Everything was still there. Nathan let out a slow breath. We made it. Atlas leaned against his leg, but something about the movement felt different, slower, stiffer. Nathan frowned. You all right? Atlas shifted his weight. Only then did Nathan notice a dark stain spreading across the snow beneath the dog's front shoulder. His stomach tightened. No! He knelt immediately. The thick fur along Atlas's left shoulder had hidden most of the injury. Now, under the flashlight, fresh blood glistened against the gray hairs. Nathan's pulse quickened. During the confusion inside the bank, during their escape through the tunnel, one of the rounds fired in the darkness had grazed Atlas without Nathan realizing it. The wound wasn't pouring blood, but it wasn't superficial either. Atlas had kept running, without a sound, without slowing Nathan down. Nathan gently rested both hands on the dog's neck. You stubborn old soldier. Atlas answered with the faintest wag of his tail. The words caught in Nathan's throat. For years, Atlas had protected him, even injured. He was still trying to finish the mission. Nathan quickly scanned the tree line. They couldn't stay here. Sheriff Boone would search every abandoned building in town before sunrise. He needed higher ground, somewhere few people remembered. Then he thought of the old Forest Service lookout. Margaret had mentioned it during breakfast. Decades ago, fire crews watched the Bitterroot Mountains from a wooden tower deep above Pine Ridge. The road had long since washed out. Only old hiking trails remained. Most locals no longer bothered with it during winter. Perfect. Nathan tightened the straps on his backpack and gently rested one hand on Atlas's shoulder. We've got one more climb. The journey into the mountains took nearly 3 hours. The snowfall grew heavier with every switchback. Pine trees bowed beneath fresh snow. The moon appeared only occasionally through racing clouds. Nathan's boots sank nearly to his knees in untouched drifts. Atlas limped more noticeably now. Several times Nathan considered carrying him. Several times Atlas refused, pulling gently forward instead. The old shepherd still believed he was on duty. Just before dawn, the trees finally opened. The abandoned fire lookout stood alone against the pale horizon. Weathered cedar walls, broken shutters, a narrow wooden staircase disappearing into the darkness. The tower overlooked the entire valley. From here, Pine Ridge looked tiny beneath the storm. Nathan pushed open the creaking door. Inside, dust covered everything. An old wood stove leaned crookedly near one wall. A rusted cot remained beneath the windows. Maps still hung from faded nails where rangers had once watched for wildfires. To Nathan, it looked like safety. He immediately set to work. Years of military survival training returned naturally. Fire first. Warmth meant life. Within 20 minutes, flames crackled inside the stove using dry cedar stored beneath the floorboards. Heat slowly filled the small cabin. Only then did Nathan turn his full attention to Atlas. He spread an old wool blanket across the floor. Easy. Atlas obeyed immediately. Nathan carefully clipped away fur around the wound, using a folding knife and a pair of small trauma scissors from his emergency kit. The injury became visible. A deep groove cut across the shoulder. The bullet had passed through the muscle without becoming lodged. Lucky. Very lucky. Still, without treatment, it could become infected. Nathan boiled snow over the stove, cleaned the wound, applied antibiotic ointment from the nearly expired first aid kit he always carried. Atlas never growled, never pulled away. Only watched Nathan with complete trust. When the bandage was finally secured, Nathan rested both hands against the dog's neck. I'm sorry. Atlas nudged Nathan's chest, almost as if comforting him instead. Nathan laughed quietly despite himself. You always were the tougher one. Outside. The wind slowly faded. Morning light spread across the Bitterroot Mountains. For the first time since discovering Lucas's letter, Nathan allowed himself to sit still. The silence should have been peaceful. Instead, the memories returned. The helicopter, the explosion, Lucas disappearing into smoke. Nathan closed his eyes. His breathing became uneven. The familiar pressure built inside his chest. Not again. He gripped the edge of the wooden table until his knuckles whitened. Across the room, Atlas slowly stood, despite the pain in his shoulder. He crossed the cabin, rested his head gently in Nathan's lap. Nothing more. No bark, no movement. Only quiet presence. Nathan's breathing gradually slowed. He looked out the frost-covered window. I thought if I survived, I'd leave the war behind. His voice barely carried above the crackling fire. But it keeps finding me. A soft knock interrupted the silence. Nathan froze. Atlas immediately turned toward the door. His ears rose. A woman's voice came through the weathered wood. Nathan, it's Emily. I came alone. Nathan remained silent. She continued. I saw Boone's deputies searching town before sunrise. I guessed you'd head for the old lookout. Nathan slowly approached one side window, peering carefully through the narrow gap in the curtain. Emily Carter stood alone in the snow. A backpack rested over one shoulder. Her cheeks were red from the cold. Her hands remained visible. No weapon. No one behind her. Nathan opened the door only a few inches. You shouldn't be here. I know. She glanced toward Atlas. The bandage immediately caught her attention. Oh my God, he'll be okay. I brought supplies. She slowly removed items from her backpack one by one. Fresh bandages, prescription antibiotics from the town clinic, canned soup, coffee, batteries, and finally, an old leather-bound journal wrapped carefully in cloth. Nathan looked at it. What's that? Emily hesitated. My father's. He kept notes before he died. Nathan felt the room grow quiet again. She looked directly into his eyes. For years, everyone said he died in a logging accident. She swallowed. But before he died, he told me something I'll never forget. Emily carefully placed the journal on the wooden table. He said, if anyone ever opened the old bank again, the town would finally have to face the truth. Nathan stared at the worn journal, then at Lucas's letter lying beside it. Two men, separated by decades. Both had tried to expose the same darkness. Neither had lived to tell the whole story. Nathan slowly looked toward Atlas. The old shepherd rested peacefully beside the fire, exhausted but alive. For the first time since arriving in Pine Ridge, Nathan understood something that changed everything. This was no longer Lucas's mission alone. It belonged to everyone who had been silenced. And for the first time in years, Nathan realized he didn't have to fight it by himself. The words settled over the little fire lookout like fresh snow. Outside, the storm had finally begun to weaken. Morning sunlight filtered through the towering pines, painting long bands of gold across the frozen mountainside. The world looked peaceful again, but Nathan knew better than to trust calm too quickly. He had learned that lesson in places much farther from home. Emily carefully removed her gloves and sat near the wood stove. For several minutes, nobody spoke. The cabin filled with ordinary sounds. The crackling fire, the wind brushing against old cedar walls, Atlas breathing slowly as he rested on the wool blanket. After days of running, the silence felt almost unfamiliar. Emily finally reached into her backpack and placed her father's journal beside Lucas's letter. I've never shown this to anyone. Nathan looked at the weathered leather cover. What changed? She gave a tired smile. You. Nathan frowned. I barely know you. I know. But you came here with nothing. You could have sold that bank. You could have walked away. Instead, you opened a door everyone else was afraid to touch. Nathan looked toward the window. I didn't know what I was opening. Emily nodded. Neither did my father. She slowly opened the journal. The pages had yellowed with age. Handwritten entries filled nearly every line. Property transfers, meeting dates, conversations, names. Some pages contained rough sketches of the bank's basement. Others listed license plate numbers and unfamiliar corporations. Nathan flipped through carefully. Then one sentence caught his attention. Richard Boone wasn't always part of it. Nathan looked up. Richard? My father wrote that Sheriff Travis Boone's father used to be sheriff before him. Emily nodded. Richard retired years ago. He died about 10 years back. Nathan continued reading. The son has started attending meetings. He asks too many questions. I hope he chooses differently. Nathan closed the journal. It looks like he didn't. No. Emily's expression grew heavy. He became exactly what my father feared. The fire popped loudly. Atlas slowly lifted his head. His ears turned toward the wooden table. Not the window. Not the door. The table. Nathan watched him. What is it? Atlas stood. His injured shoulder made him limp slightly, but determination outweighed pain. He approached the table slowly. His nose moved past Emily's journal, past Lucas's letter, then stopped above one of the dusty videotapes Nathan had carried out of the vault. The tape had no label, only a faded strip of masking tape with a handwritten number. Atlas sniffed it once. Then something unexpected happened. The old German shepherd let out the softest whine Nathan had ever heard. Not fear, not warning, recognition. Nathan exchanged a puzzled look with Emily. Atlas lowered himself onto the floor. His eyes never left the tape. Nathan picked it up. You've been acting strange ever since we found Lucas's things. Emily tilted her head. What if he recognizes something? Nathan looked down at Atlas. You mean the tape? No. She looked directly at the dog. I mean the scent. Nathan's expression slowly changed. Military working dogs remembered scents for years, sometimes decades. Entire investigations had been solved because a trained dog recognized something everyone else overlooked. Nathan crouched beside Atlas. You smell Lucas. Atlas immediately looked into Nathan's eyes. His tail moved once. Only once. Nathan's heartbeat quickened. He reached for the old photograph again. The one showing 4 young seals. He held it beside Atlas. The aging shepherd quietly sniffed the faded image. When Lucas's face reached the dog's nose, Atlas gently touched the photograph with it, then licked the corner where Lucas stood. Nathan froze. Emily covered her mouth. My God, Nathan whispered. It can't be. Then another memory surfaced. One he hadn't thought about in years. It came without warning, not as a nightmare, as something almost forgotten. The deployment before their final mission. Lucas laughing as a young German shepherd chased a tennis ball across a temporary base. Nathan remembered teasing him. You spoil that dog. Lucas had grinned. He earned it. Nathan remembered the dog's name, not Atlas. Back then, his name had been Atlas too. The realization struck like lightning. Nathan stood abruptly. No. He looked at the dog, then back at the photograph. The Army and Navy occasionally reassigned military working dogs after handlers were killed, retired, or transferred. During the confusion following the failed mission, Nathan had simply been assigned Atlas. Nobody had explained much. He had assumed the dog came from another unit. Nobody ever told him. Atlas had already belonged to Lucas. Nathan slowly knelt again. His voice barely escaped. "You knew him." Atlas stepped forward, very gently. He rested his forehead against Nathan's chest, exactly the way he always did whenever Nathan struggled through a PTSD episode. Except now, Nathan realized it wasn't something Atlas had learned from him. He had learned it from Lucas. Tears blurred Nathan's vision. For years, he had believed he was the one taking care of an aging military dog. The truth was almost unbearable. Atlas had been carrying two soldiers, first Lucas, then Nathan, without ever giving up on either one. Emily quietly turned away, giving them privacy. Nathan wrapped both arms around the old shepherd. "You've been trying to bring me back to him." Atlas remained perfectly still. No bark, no movement. Only quiet loyalty. Nathan looked toward the videotape still resting on the table. "If you recognized Lucas..." He swallowed hard. "Then maybe..." He picked up the tape. "You've been trying to tell me this wasn't just evidence. It was his message." Emily nodded slowly. "We should watch it." Nathan looked around the abandoned lookout. There was no television, no VCR, nothing capable of playing tapes that old. Emily thought for a moment. "The elementary school still has an old media room." Nathan shook his head. "Too risky. The sheriff will be watching every public building." She considered another option. "My father's workshop. It's outside town. He repaired old farm equipment. He never threw anything away." She smiled faintly. "If an old VCR still exists in Pine Ridge, it'll probably be there." Nathan looked down at Atlas. The old dog seemed calmer now, almost relieved, as if recognizing Lucas's scent had completed something he had carried silently for years. Nathan gently scratched behind his ears. "You never forgot him." Atlas closed his eyes for a moment. Outside, sunlight finally broke through the clouds, spilling across the snow-covered Bitterroot Mountains. For the first time since arriving in Pine Ridge, Nathan understood why Atlas had stopped in front of the abandoned bank that first morning. He hadn't been searching for treasure. He hadn't been following curiosity. He had been following memory. The old German shepherd hadn't discovered Lucas's final mission. He had been trying to finish it all along. Nathan sat in silence for a long time. His hand rested on Atlas's broad neck while the fire crackled softly inside the abandoned lookout tower. Outside, the storm had finally passed, leaving the Bitterroot Mountains wrapped in brilliant white beneath a cloudless winter sky. Everything looked peaceful. It was the kind of morning that convinced people nothing bad could possibly happen. Nathan knew better. He had seen battlefields that looked beautiful from a distance. Emily quietly folded Lucas's letter and slid it back into the envelope. "We need to get those tapes somewhere safe." Nathan nodded. "And we need to know what's on them before Boone finds us." Emily reached into her coat pocket and removed a folded piece of paper. "I didn't tell you everything." Nathan looked up. "Before I came here this morning, I made one phone call." Nathan's expression hardened. "To who?" "A woman named Rachel Monroe." The name meant nothing to him. Emily continued. "My father trusted her. He met her years ago during a land rights investigation. She's a federal investigator now." Nathan remained cautious. "You trust her?" "With my life." She handed him the paper. A phone number, a location, one sentence written beneath it. "Iron Bridge. Noon. Come alone." Nathan stared at the note. If Boone has been watching this town for years, he'll be watching every road. Emily nodded. He probably already knows someone contacted outside help. Nathan looked toward Atlas. The old shepherd had finished resting and was carefully testing his injured shoulder. The limp remained, but his eyes were bright, determined, just like always. Nathan finally stood. We leave in 20 minutes. The road to Iron Bridge wound through dense pine forests before following the frozen Black Elk River toward the southern edge of the valley. Nathan and Emily avoided the main highway. Instead, they followed abandoned logging trails buried beneath fresh snow. Atlas moved ahead whenever the terrain allowed, stopping often to scan the trees before quietly continuing. His pace had slowed because of the injury. His instincts had not. Around mid-morning, they reached a rocky overlook. Below them stretched Pine Ridge. Nathan crouched behind a fallen tree. Several sheriff's vehicles moved slowly through town, more than before. Roadblocks, deputies stopping trucks, search teams moving door to door. Emily whispered, "He's panicking." Nathan nodded. He knows the evidence is gone, and desperate people make mistakes. Atlas suddenly stiffened. His ears snapped toward the valley road. Nathan immediately followed his gaze. A convoy of 3 dark pickup trucks left town together, not toward the highway, toward Iron Bridge. Nathan's jaw tightened. He knows. Emily looked alarmed. How? Nathan didn't answer immediately. Military experience offered several possibilities. Someone had intercepted a phone call. Someone inside town had reported Emily leaving. Or someone had simply guessed. It didn't matter. The result was the same. Boone would be waiting. Nathan studied the map one last time. There are only 2 ways across the river. Emily looked at the narrow canyon. The bridge, or 20 miles north. We don't have 20 miles. Nathan secured the backpack containing Lucas's evidence. Then we crossed the bridge. They reached the forest surrounding Iron Bridge just before noon. The old steel structure stretched across the icy river nearly 70 feet below. Snow covered its weathered planks. No other vehicles appeared nearby. Too quiet. Nathan motioned for Emily to stay back. He studied the area through a pair of compact binoculars he had found inside the fire lookout. Nothing. No movement. No engines. No smoke. Atlas growled. Low. Almost beneath hearing. Nathan lowered the binoculars. What is it? Atlas wasn't watching the bridge. He was staring into the trees beyond it. Nathan followed his gaze. Nothing. Then, the briefest reflection. Sunlight against glass. Optics. Someone watching from concealment. Nathan whispered, "They're here." Almost instantly, engines roared to life. 2 pickup trucks emerged from opposite sides of the bridge, blocking both exits. Doors flew open. Several armed men stepped out. Sheriff Travis Boone climbed from the lead truck. His winter coat flapped in the cold wind. He didn't draw his weapon. Instead, he called across the bridge. "It doesn't have to end badly, Nathan." His voice carried easily through the canyon. Nathan remained where he was. Atlas stood beside him. Emily stayed hidden farther back among the trees. Boone raised one hand. "I know what Lucas left you." Nathan's eyes narrowed. "So you did know him." Boone sighed. "I knew enough. He should have walked away. He didn't." Nathan answered quietly, "Neither will I." For a moment only, the wind spoke. Then Boone took one slow step forward. "Hand me the evidence. You and the dog walk away. No charges, no trouble. You disappear." Nathan almost smiled. I've heard deals like that before. They usually end badly. Boone's expression hardened. You think Washington cares about this town? They'll bury the files. They always do. Nathan looked down briefly at Atlas. The old shepherd watched every movement across the bridge, waiting, trusting, ready. Nathan looked back at Boone. Maybe. But I'm still going to make them try. Boone slowly reached inside his coat. Nathan shifted instinctively. The movement happened almost simultaneously. A rifle appeared from behind one of the trucks. Nathan saw the barrel first, then the flash. The sharp crack echoed across the canyon. Time seemed to slow. Nathan pushed Emily downward. At that exact instant, Atlas launched himself forward. The aging German shepherd struck Nathan across the chest with every ounce of strength he had left. The force knocked Nathan sideways into the snow. Another shot rang out. Wood splintered from the bridge railing. Nathan rolled behind a steel support beam, pulling Atlas with him. The old dog landed hard. Nathan's heart pounded wildly. He searched Atlas with trembling hands. The bandaged shoulder had reopened during the tackle, staining fresh snow with bright red drops. But the new round had missed. Atlas had thrown himself into the line of danger before Nathan ever saw it. Nathan pressed his forehead briefly against the dog's. You saved me again. Atlas answered with a tired lick across Nathan's glove. Across the bridge, Boone shouted, Enough! Then, a distant sound interrupted him. Not trucks, not snowmobiles, rotor blades, faint at first, growing louder. Every head turned toward the southern sky. Over the mountain ridge emerged a dark helicopter bearing federal markings. A second vehicle raced along the river road below. Boone's confident expression disappeared. Nathan slowly stood behind the bridge support, one hand resting on Atlas. Far above the canyon, the helicopter circled once. The battle for Pine Ridge had just entered a new chapter, and for the first time in 30 years, the people who buried the truth realized they were no longer the only ones coming to Iron Bridge. The helicopter descended through the clear winter sky, its rotor wash sending snow swirling across the frozen bridge in blinding waves. Sheriff Travis Boone looked upward. For the first time since Nathan had met him, certainty vanished from the sheriff's face. The black SUV climbing the road from the southern side reached the bridge seconds later. Its doors opened before the vehicle had fully stopped. Men and women wearing heavy winter jackets stepped out with calm, practiced precision. No one shouted, no one rushed. They simply moved with the confidence of people who already understood the situation. A woman in a dark coat stepped forward, holding a leather case above her head. Federal investigator Rachel Monroe. Her voice carried across the bridge. Everyone stay where you are. Boone forced a smile that looked painfully unnatural. Agent Monroe. I wasn't expecting Washington to send anyone. Rachel didn't return the smile. I imagine you've spent a long time hoping we wouldn't. Silence settled over Iron Bridge. Nathan remained behind the steel support with Atlas at his side. Emily slowly stood beside him, brushing snow from her coat. Rachel's eyes found Nathan. Mr. Brooks? Nathan nodded once. I have something that belongs with your investigation. Boone immediately stepped forward. Careful. He's unstable. Former military. Suffers from PTSD. Nathan almost laughed. The same condition that had once made people avoid him was now being used to destroy his credibility. Rachel looked at Boone without expression. Thank you, Sheriff. I'll decide who appears credible. Nathan stepped carefully into the open. Atlas limped beside him, but refused to fall behind. The old German shepherd's injured shoulder had begun bleeding again beneath the bandage, yet his head remained high. Nathan removed the backpack slowly. Every movement was deliberate. No surprises. He handed it directly to Rachel. Inside rested Lucas's handwritten letter. The maps, the videotapes, the original property records, the brass key. Rachel opened the bag just far enough to examine the contents. Her expression changed almost immediately. She recognized what she was looking at. This, she paused, is much more than I expected. Nathan answered quietly. It belonged to a friend. He died trying to protect it. Rachel carefully closed the backpack. It won't disappear again. Boone took another step. You don't understand. Those files are decades old. They prove nothing. Rachel calmly removed Lucas's letter. She unfolded the first page. Her eyes scanned several lines before she looked back at Boone. They prove enough to begin. Within minutes, the bridge transformed into something entirely different. Federal investigators photographed vehicles, collected weapons, separated witnesses. Every conversation became carefully documented. Nathan watched quietly. The adrenaline that had carried him through the last several days slowly faded, leaving behind only exhaustion. Atlas leaned gently against his leg. Nathan rested one hand on the dog's neck. You did good. Atlas closed his eyes for a moment. Rachel returned nearly an hour later. I'd like you to come with us. Nathan looked toward Pine Ridge in the distance. I'm not leaving until I know what happens here. Rachel nodded. You deserve that. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. The videotapes contained recordings of closed bank meetings. Several showed signatures matching county land records. Others captured conversations about foreclosure auctions and hidden financial transfers. Lucas hadn't simply gathered evidence, he had organized it. Every document pointed toward the next. Every videotape confirmed another piece. By late afternoon, search warrants had already been issued. Sheriff Travis Boone surrendered his badge without another word. He looked older than he had that morning. Not defeated, simply exposed. As deputies escorted him toward a waiting vehicle, he paused near Nathan. I really did love this town. Nathan looked at him quietly. You should have protected it. Boone lowered his eyes. For the first time, he had no answer. Over the following days, Pine Ridge changed in ways no one thought possible. County offices were searched. Old financial records were recovered. Developers who had quietly purchased ranches at suspiciously low prices were questioned. Former bank executives were located. Several admitted they had remained silent because they believed no one would ever reopen the old bank. Families who had spent decades believing they had simply been unlucky finally learned something different. They had been deceived. Emily stood beside Nathan outside the courthouse one cold afternoon as reporters gathered along the sidewalk. I used to think everyone had forgotten my father. Nathan looked toward the courthouse doors. They hadn't forgotten. They were afraid to remember. 1 week later, the town gathered inside the high school gymnasium. Not for a basketball game, for something far more important. Rows of folding chairs filled the floor. Ranchers, teachers, retired miners, young families, veterans. Nearly everyone in Pine Ridge came. Rachel Monroe stepped onto the stage first. She spoke plainly. The investigation is still ongoing, but one thing is already clear. The closure of Pine Ridge National Bank was not simply a financial collapse. It was the beginning of years of deception that harmed honest families. The room remained silent. Some people cried quietly. Others simply stared ahead. Rachel continued. We also owe an apology. She turned toward Nathan, and toward a man who cannot stand here today. Nathan slowly walked onto the stage carrying a small wooden box. Inside rested Lucas Reed's military dog tag. Rachel looked out across the crowd. Petty Officer Lucas Reed was falsely suspected by some of abandoning his duty. The evidence now shows something very different. He sacrificed everything while trying to protect this community. Nathan placed the dog tag carefully upon the podium. He finished his mission. Nathan's voice was steady. He just couldn't live long enough to tell everyone why. No one applauded immediately. Instead, the room stood together in complete silence, a silence filled with respect rather than fear. After nearly a minute, an elderly rancher in the front row slowly rose to his feet. He removed his worn cowboy hat. Then another person stood. Then another. Soon the entire gymnasium stood together, not cheering, simply honoring a man whose name had finally been restored. Nathan looked down. Atlas sat quietly beside him, despite the bandage wrapped around his shoulder. Children near the front smiled at the old German shepherd. One little boy whispered to his mother, "He's a hero too." Nathan heard it. He smiled for the first time in many years, without forcing himself. The applause finally came, not loud, not wild, steady, grateful. It echoed through the gym long after the ceremony ended. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Nathan stepped outside into the crisp Montana evening. Fresh snow reflected the fading sunlight. Emily joined him. They'll remember Lucas now. Nathan looked toward the mountains surrounding Pine Ridge. I hope they remember something else too. What? He glanced down at Atlas. That the truth only survived because one old dog refused to forget. The German shepherd looked up at Nathan, his graying muzzle dusted with snow. His tired eyes were peaceful. For the first time since Nathan had arrived in Pine Ridge, the burden both of them had carried together finally felt lighter. Winter slowly surrendered to spring. The snow that had buried Pine Ridge for months retreated into the shadows of the Bitterroot Mountains, feeding clear streams that rushed through the valley once again. Green returned to the ranches that had waited so long for a season of renewal, and the old brick bank at the end of Main Street no longer looked like a forgotten monument. It looked like a promise. Every morning before sunrise, Nathan unlocked the weathered front doors. The familiar creak no longer sounded lonely. Instead, it welcomed volunteers carrying paint cans, lumber, donated furniture, and fresh coffee. Ranchers who had once crossed the street to avoid the abandoned building now parked pickup trucks outside before breakfast. Teenagers scraped old paint from the walls. Retired carpenters repaired broken staircases. Veterans from neighboring towns arrived carrying toolboxes instead of memories they wished to forget. The building that had hidden decades of darkness slowly filled with light. Atlas watched every bit of it. His shoulder had healed well, though the gray-muzzled German shepherd walked with a slower, careful stride now. Children often followed him through the lobby, laughing whenever he accepted another gentle scratch behind the ears. Nathan smiled every time. For years, Atlas had known only missions. Now he knew peace. One afternoon, Margaret Hale carried a tray of sandwiches into what had once been the bank manager's office. I figured builders still need to eat. Nathan laughed. You've been feeding me since I walked into town. Margaret looked around the room. And look where that got you. Nathan followed her gaze. The office no longer resembled the cold place where he had first lit a lonely fire. Fresh pine walls replaced the cracked plaster. Sunlight poured through newly restored windows. On one wall hung photographs of local veterans, ranching families, volunteer firefighters, teachers, and rescue workers. Ordinary people. The kind of people Lucas had wanted to protect. Emily entered carrying another box of books. The library donated these. Nathan looked inside. Financial planning, small business guides, veterans resources, children's books, history of Montana. Everything the old bank had once failed to give the town now seemed to arrive one box at a time. Weeks later, A polished wooden sign was carefully lifted above the entrance. People gathered quietly along Main Street to watch. Nathan stood beside Emily, Margaret, Rachel Monroe, dozens of volunteers, and Atlas. The cloth covering the sign slowly dropped. The words beneath caught the morning sunlight. Lucas Reed Veterans and Family Community Center. No applause came immediately, only quiet smiles. Some people wiped away tears. Nathan looked upward. "About time, brother." The words disappeared into the mountain air. Inside the building, the old vault remained exactly where it had always stood. Only now, its enormous steel door rested permanently open. The rust had been carefully cleaned away, but never completely removed. Nathan insisted on leaving the scars visible. "They're part of the story," he had told everyone. Inside the vault, shelves no longer held forgotten ledgers or hidden evidence. Instead, they displayed the truth openly. Lucas Reed's military dog tag rested inside a glass case beneath soft lighting. Beside it sat Atlas's worn tactical collar from his years as a military working dog. Nearby rested photographs of Lucas, Nathan, and their SEAL teammates. Copies of the recovered documents explained how the town had been deceived, and how ordinary people had refused to let that deception define them forever. Above everything else hung a simple bronze plaque. The truth should never be buried. Visitors often stood quietly before it. Some stayed only a minute. Others remained much longer. Nathan rarely interrupted them. He understood that healing happened at different speeds. One Saturday morning, the community center officially opened. Families filled the lobby. Veterans met over coffee. Children gathered around tables where volunteers taught budgeting, computer skills, and job applications. In one classroom, a counselor met privately with a young Marine struggling to adjust after returning home. Nathan passed the open doorway. The young veteran looked frightened, lost. Nathan recognized the expression immediately. Later that afternoon, the young man found Nathan sitting on the front steps beside Atlas. "I heard you were homeless." Nathan nodded. "For a while." "How'd you come back?" Nathan looked at Atlas before answering. "I stopped trying to carry everything by myself." The young Marine looked down. "I don't know if I can." Nathan smiled gently. "You don't have to know today. You just have to keep showing up tomorrow." The young man reached down to pet Atlas. The old shepherd leaned into the touch without hesitation. Sometimes comfort needed no explanation. As summer arrived, letters began arriving from across the country. Some came from veterans. Others came from families who had finally recovered property lost decades earlier after the investigation uncovered fraudulent land transfers. One elderly widow wrote that she had planted apple trees on land, returned to her family after 31 years. A rancher from another county sent a photograph of his grandchildren riding horses across fields his father had believed were gone forever. Nathan kept every letter, not because they praised him, because they proved Lucas's sacrifice had mattered. Late one evening, after everyone else had gone home, Nathan locked the front doors and walked slowly toward the vault. The building had grown quiet. Only the gentle hum of lights and the distant chirping of spring crickets drifted through the open windows. Atlas padded faithfully beside him. Nathan stopped before Lucas's display. He rested one hand lightly against the glass. "You finished it." He smiled. "It just took a little longer than either of us planned." Atlas quietly sat beside him. The old German shepherd looked toward Lucas's photograph for several long moments. Then he slowly lay down on the polished floor, peacefully, content. Nathan understood. Atlas had carried one final mission across years of silence. He had protected Lucas's memory. Then he had protected Nathan until the truth finally reached daylight. Outside, children laughed as they rode bicycles past the community center. Neighbors greeted one another across Main Street. The abandoned bank that had once symbolized fear had become the heart of Pine Ridge. Nathan stepped outside into the warm evening. Golden sunlight washed across the mountains that surrounded the valley. He remembered the first morning he had arrived here with an empty wallet, a broken heart, and no destination beyond surviving another winter. He had believed he was buying nothing more than shelter. Instead, he had found purpose. He had found a community willing to stand together. He had honored a fallen brother. Most importantly, he had discovered that healing did not mean forgetting the past. It meant refusing to let the past decide the future. Nathan sat beside Atlas on the front steps as the sun disappeared beyond the Bitterroot Mountains. The old German shepherd rested his head against Nathan's knee exactly as he had done so many times before. Nathan looked down and smiled. Home. This time, the word no longer felt unfamiliar. It felt true, and as the evening breeze drifted through the permanently open vault behind them, it seemed to carry one final reminder through the old brick walls. Some doors are meant to keep people out. Others are meant to let the truth finally come home. If you believe loyalty and truth are always worth fighting for, type yes in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Thanks for spending this time with us. And if stories about justice, courage, and ordinary Americans standing their ground mean something to you, we'd be honored to have you subscribe and join us for the next story.